All right, so are you ready to dive deep into this Fiscal Affairs Policy Officer interview prep? I know I am. You've got a goal, right? A career where you get to blend economic know-how with real-world impact. And to get ready for that interview, you've brought some RoleCatcher resources.
Yeah, smart move. RoleCatcher can be a real game changer for people.
So they've got these in-depth career guides. But what's really cool is their AI.
Yeah, the AI is awesome. It can actually analyze job descriptions, the ones you're looking at, and give you feedback.
Unlike my application material.
Exactly like your CV. I mean, imagine having an AI assistant that helps you write the perfect CV.
And it even helps you practice for your interview.
Yep, that's the power of RoleCatcher.
Okay, well, let's back up a sec before we jump into the interview stuff. What does a Fiscal Affairs Policy Officer actually do?
Right.
The RoleCatcher guide uses phrases like analyzing taxation and spending policies, but it feels like so much more than just, crunching numbers.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's way more than that. Think about it this way. You're not just crunching numbers. You're shaping the actual regulations that impact public welfare.
Yeah, the big.
Social programs, like you're helping to craft policies that have a real impact on people's lives.
Wow, that's actually pretty powerful stuff when you think about it that way. Okay, so let's get down to business, shall we? RoleCatcher has identified 10 common interview questions, and I think we should break each one down and really help you shine. What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right, question number 1. What inspired you to pursue a career as a Fiscal Affairs Policy Officer? So this one seems pretty straightforward, right? But I bet there's a way to make your answer really stand out.
Yeah, totally. Don't just give them some canned response. Think about what really sparked your interest in fiscal policy. Was there a specific event that happened? Did you read a book that just blew your mind? Maybe you even had a personal experience that showed you firsthand the impact of economic policies. The key is to connect that passion with your own story.
So it's all about storytelling.
Yeah, if you share a genuine story, that'll make your answer way more memorable than just listing off some generic reasons why you want the job. It's got to be real.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of follow-up question could they hit you with?
It might ask you to, elaborate on that story, Go a little deeper. What did you learn from that experience? How did it make you want to work in fiscal policy? They'll want to see that fire in you.
Okay, question number 2. How do you stay up to date with changes in fiscal policies and regulations?
I think I probably mentioned that I read, financial news, but I feel like they want something more specific.
You're right. It's a fast-moving field, so you got to show them you're really engaged.
Yeah.
Go beyond just the daily headlines. Have you read the Journal of Public Economics?
Oh, okay.
The IMF Fiscal Monitor? Mentioning those would show a deeper level of knowledge, and following economists or policy think tanks, those are relevant to your area of interest.
Yeah, I see. So it's not just about reading the news. It's about seeking out those diverse perspectives and staying ahead of the curve.
Now, how could RoleCatcher's AI help me with this particular question?
Oh, it's pretty amazing, actually. So the AI can analyze the job description and identify keywords related to specific policy areas or regions. And then based on that, it suggests, publications or organizations that you should look into.
That align with those keywords.
Exactly. So you're tailoring your answer to the specific role.
It's like having a personalized research assistant. What kind of a follow-up question could they ask about staying up to date?
I think they might ask you to discuss a recent policy change that, caught your attention, and then how you think it might impact the work of a Fiscal Affairs Policy Officer. So be ready with a specific example.
All right, question number 3. How do you prioritize competing demands in a fast-paced environment? This is a classic one.
Oh, yeah.
But I bet they're looking for answers that are really specific to the demands of this particular role.
For sure. So you got to think about the kind of pressures a Fiscal Affairs Policy Officer actually faces, right? You're juggling multiple projects, deadlines are tight, you've got complex stakeholder expectations. So instead of just listing, generic time management skills, talk about how you'd assess the urgency and impact of different tasks.
So it's more about strategy.
Exactly. How would you allocate your time and resources strategically? You got to show them you can handle the heat and make good judgments when things get a little crazy.
Right, because in this role, a missed deadline could have, serious consequences. What kind of follow-up questions for this one?
Well, they might give you a hypothetical scenario where you've got multiple urgent tasks all vying for your attention at the same time. So be prepared to walk them through your thought process. How would you prioritize those tasks? And how would you make sure nothing slips through the cracks?
Okay, question number 4. How do you ensure that fiscal policies are aligned with organizational goals and objectives? This one feels a little more big picture.
It definitely is. You need to show them you understand the bigger context of fiscal policy. How does it fit into the overall mission of the organization? Start by researching, the organization's strategic priorities, and then think about how your role as a fiscal affairs policy officer contributes to those goals.
So it's more about being like a strategic thinker.
Exactly, not just a number cruncher.
What kind of follow-up question could they ask here?
They might ask you to describe a time when you had to adapt a fiscal policy to match like a shift in organizational priorities. So be ready with a specific example. How did you overcome the challenges and achieve a good outcome?
All right, question number 5. How do you evaluate the effectiveness of fiscal policies? This one feels pretty technical. What kind of knowledge should you showcase?
Yeah, it is technical, but it's also about showing off your analytical skills, and that you're results-oriented. You should be familiar with key economic indicators and data analysis techniques, the ones used to evaluate the impact of those fiscal policies. Mentioning specific methodologies like cost-benefit analysis or regression analysis shows that you understand the tools of the trade.
So you're not just designing policies. You need to be able to measure their impact and make sure they're hitting the mark right. How could RoleCatcher's AI help someone prepare for this one?
Well, it's really cool. RoleCatcher's AI analyzes the job description and pinpoints the specific data or metrics that matter most to the role. So, for example, if the job focuses on public expenditure, the AI might recommend you brush up on government budgeting and performance measurement frameworks. This personalized prep ensures you're highlighting the most relevant skills.
So it takes the guesswork out of prepping.
Exactly.
Now, what about possible follow-up questions?
They might ask for a specific instance where you evaluated a policy or program, outlining your methods and any challenges. They might also bring up a situation where the results led to a policy change. Always be ready to think on your feet.
Okay, let's move on to question 6.
All right, question number 6. How do you ensure compliance with fiscal policies and regulations? This one really highlights how important it is to pay attention to detail
Yeah, first.
and to be ethical.
Oh, totally. I bet in this role, even like a tiny mistake could have huge consequences.
Absolutely.
So how can someone show they're really committed to compliance during an interview?
It's all about proving you have like a deep understanding of the rules and you're proactive about upholding them. You could talk about your experience, developing internal controls,
Oh,
conducting audits, implementing training programs, making sure everyone is on the same page.
so you're not just waiting for something to go wrong.
Exactly.
You're trying to create a culture of doing things right from the start.
Yep.
What about follow-up questions? I bet they'd want to hear about like real-life examples.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They might ask you to describe a situation where you found a potential compliance issue,
Yeah.
And what steps did you take to address it? So be ready with a specific example that shows your proactive approach, your commitment to ethical practices.
All right, on to question 7. How do you manage risk in fiscal management? This feels like a big one. It's not just about numbers, right?
Right.
It's about anticipating potential pitfalls and having a plan to deal with them.
Exactly. And the risks in fiscal management, they can be pretty complex and multifaceted.
Oh, for sure.
They can range from things like economic fluctuations and political instability to changes in regulations and even natural disasters. So you need to show them you can think critically about these different types of risks and come up with strategies to address them.
So where would you even begin with this question in an interview?
I would start by outlining a structured risk management framework. Talk about different ways to identify, assess, and prioritize risks. You could mention techniques like scenario planning or sensitivity analysis. And then you want to talk about specific mitigation strategies, things like diversifying investments, hedging against currency fluctuations, or building reserves to buffer against unforeseen shocks.
So it sounds like it's all about having a well-thought-out plan and showing you can think strategically about potential problems. How could RoleCatcher's AI be helpful in preparing for a question like this?
RoleCatcher's AI can actually analyze the job description and pinpoint any keywords that relate to specific risks that might be super relevant to the role.
Okay.
So, for example, if the role is about managing a government pension fund, the AI might suggest that you brush up on actuarial science and the risks that come with demographic changes.
That's interesting. It's like personalized coaching almost. What kind of follow-up questions could they ask about risk management?
Well, they might give you a hypothetical risk scenario that's specific to the role and then ask you to walk them through your thought process for tackling it. Or they might ask about your experience using specific risk management tools or methodologies.
Okay, moving on to question 8. How do you ensure transparency and accountability in fiscal management? This one feels pretty crucial, especially in the public sector where public trust is so important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Transparency and accountability are fundamental to good governance and making sure public funds are managed responsibly. So to nail this question, you really need to show your commitment to open communication, to ethical practices, and to having clear reporting mechanisms.
So it's about being a responsible leader and setting the right example here.
Exactly.
How could someone really drive that point home during an interview?
You could talk about your experience developing those clear financial reporting mechanisms you know, establishing internal controls to prevent fraud and abuse, and creating a culture of accountability within your team. You can also mention your knowledge of relevant laws and regulations like Freedom of Information Acts or government accounting standards.
So it's all about building systems and processes that keep things transparent and make sure resources are being used the right way. What kind of follow-up questions might they ask about this?
They could ask you to describe a time when you had to communicate a tough financial decision to stakeholders. Maybe there were budget cuts or
Yeah.
program reductions.
Yeah.
They could also ask about how you handle sensitive information or respond to public inquiries about financial stuff.
Okay, we're down to the last few questions now. Question number 9 is all about leadership. How do you lead a team of fiscal policy analysts effectively?
This is your chance to show off your leadership style and your ability to motivate and inspire a team of experts. Remember, you're not just managing tasks. You're fostering a collaborative environment where everyone feels valued and empowered to do their best work.
Right, it's like you're conducting this orchestra of really smart people, each with their own unique expertise. What specific qualities should you highlight when answering this question?
Highlight your ability to communicate, effectively delegate tasks strategically, and provide constructive feedback. You also want to mention your approach to resolving conflicts and building consensus among team members who might have different perspectives.
So it's all about finding that balance between encouraging individual growth and driving the team towards those shared goals. What kind of follow-up questions might they have about your leadership style?
They might ask you to describe a challenging team project and what your role was in making it a success. Be prepared to share a story that shows off your ability to delegate, effectively resolve conflicts, and motivate your team.
Great insight. All right, we've made it to the final question on RoleCatcher's list. How do you balance the needs of different stakeholders in fiscal policy development? I can only imagine this is like a constant juggling act, especially when you're dealing with competing priorities and limited resources.
Oh, it definitely can be. This question is all about showing your ability to navigate those tricky stakeholder relationships and come up with creative solutions that work for everyone, while staying true to those overall policy objectives.
So how would you recommend someone approach this question? What are the key points to hit?
I would start by really emphasizing your communication and negotiation skills. Highlight your ability to really listen to stakeholders, to understand their perspectives, and to find common ground. You could even talk about your experience using stakeholder mapping techniques to identify those key players and their interests.
It's almost like you're a diplomat, right? Building bridges and finding compromises that benefit everyone. Now, what kind of follow-up questions could they ask about managing those stakeholders?
They might present you with a hypothetical scenario where you've got conflicting stakeholder interests, and then ask you to explain how you'd find that balanced solution. Or they might ask about a time you had to make a tough decision that maybe didn't please everybody and how you communicated that decision to the stakeholders.
That's super helpful advice.
Yeah.
Wow, we just covered 10 tough interview questions, and I feel way more confident about how to tackle them now.
Oh, okay.
But before we move on, I want to emphasize that RoleCatcher's AI can be a game changer during this process.
Totally. It goes beyond just giving generic advice. RoleCatcher's AI actually analyzes the specific interview questions taking into account all those little nuances of the job description and the organization's culture. And then it gives you tailored suggestions for putting together answers that'll resonate with the interviewers.
It's like having a secret weapon up your sleeve.
Yeah.
And, while we were talking about these questions, something just kind of hit me. We talked about all the technical stuff, right? Like analyzing all that data, understanding those complex policy frameworks, managing risk. But what about the people side of this job? I mean, you're working with all sorts of different stakeholders, from government officials to community groups. That's got to come with some serious people skills, right?
Oh, absolutely. Fiscal Affairs Policy Officers, they're not just dealing with numbers, You're dealing with real people, and they've got their own perspectives, priorities, and sometimes their interests clash. Being able to handle those relationships well, that's a big part of being successful in this role.
Okay, so let's say an interviewer asks you, how do you handle those different stakeholders? What kind of skills and experiences would you highlight?
Communication is key. Being able to explain those tricky financial concepts in a way that anyone can understand, even if they don't have a background in economics. But it's more than just explaining stuff well. It's about really listening, you know? Understanding where everyone's coming from and building relationships with people from all walks of life.
So you're like a translator almost,
Yeah.
bridging the gap between all that technical jargon and everyday language. What else would you emphasize?
I would definitely talk about working in collaborative environments, especially projects that involve lots of different stakeholders.
Like what? Give me an example.
It could be community outreach initiatives or cross-functional teams within a government agency. The main thing is to show that you can navigate different personalities, build consensus, and find creative solutions that work for everyone.
So you're not just a numbers person. You're a diplomat, a negotiator, a mediator, sometimes all at once.
Exactly. And, I'd even argue that those soft skills are even more important in a field like fiscal policy, where your decisions can have such a big impact.
That makes me think about something we touched on earlier, the international aspect of this career.
Yes, the RoleCatcher guide mentioned that, and it's definitely worth looking into. Could you imagine working on fiscal policies that affect global economies? Collaborating with international organizations on things like development finance or trade agreements?
That would be amazing. It adds a whole new level to this career. But even if you're not traveling the world, the core skills are still the same, right?
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't matter if you're working locally, nationally, or internationally, you still need that mix of analytical skills, policy expertise, and strong interpersonal skills.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. We've gone way beyond just reading a basic job description. You've gotten a real sense of what it takes to thrive as a fiscal affairs policy officer.
And thanks to RoleCatcher, you have the tools and resources to make it happen. Their AI can guide you every step of the way, from polishing your application to nailing those tough interview questions.
It's an amazing resource for anyone who wants to break into this field or take their career to the next level. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. We've talked about analytical skills, policy knowledge, leadership potential, and those all-important people skills. But here's the big question. How do you see yourself making a difference in this role? What kind of impact do you want to have on the world through your work in fiscal policy?
It's a great question, and one that's worth thinking about as you start this exciting journey. Remember, fiscal policy is about more than just numbers. It's about creating a better future for people, communities, even whole countries.
We hope this deep dive has been inspiring, that it's given you the tools you need, and maybe even sparked a new passion for the world of fiscal affairs. Thanks for joining us, and best of luck on your path to becoming a Fiscal Affairs Policy Officer.